Hi, my name is Elena Martinez. I am the president of an import-export company based in New York. Over the years, I have worked with companies all over the world. I have imported products. I have built partnerships. I have negotiated contracts across countries and cultures. But a few years ago, I made a very different kind of decision. A decision that changed not only my company, but also my understanding of global business. I decided to invest directly in another country, not just to buy from them, not just to trade with them, but to actually own part of a company there. That decision is what we call foreign direct investment, or FDI. Today, I want to tell you a story, not from a textbook, but from my own experience. How I found a company in India, why I decided to acquire it, what opportunities I saw, and what risks I had to face. Because foreign direct investment is not just about numbers, it is about decisions, people, uncertainty, and long-term commitment. Let me take you back to where it all started. Let me take you back to the moment when this journey really began. At the time, my company was already importing textiles and handcrafted goods from different countries. India had always been on my radar, not just because of its size, but because of its deep manufacturing tradition, skilled labor, strong supply networks, and a long history in textiles. For years, we had been buying from suppliers there. Emails, video calls, purchase orders. Everything was transactional, efficient, but distant. Then one year, I decided to visit India in person. I wanted to see things with my own eyes. Factories, workflows, people. Because there is something you understand in person that you never fully grasp through a screen. I visited several cities, met with different suppliers, walked through production floors, watched how materials moved from one stage to another. And then, in a mid-sized industrial town, I came across a company that felt different. It was not the biggest, not the most modern, but it was disciplined, consistent, and quietly efficient. The owner knew every part of the process. The workers were experienced. There was very little waste. And most importantly, they delivered quality again and again. That caught my attention. Over the next few days, I spent more time with them, not just as a buyer, but as an observer. I asked questions, I watched how they handled problems, I paid attention to how decisions were made, and slowly, a different thought began to form in my mind. What if, instead of just buying from this company, I became part of it? What if I moved from being a customer to being an investor? That idea was the beginning of my foreign direct investment. That idea stayed with me. What if I didn't just buy from this company, but became part of it? At first, I pushed the thought away, because this was a very different kind of decision. Buying products is simple. You place an order, you pay, you receive goods. But investing in a company means commitment, responsibility, risk. So I stepped back and started thinking more carefully. Why would I do this? What would change? And slowly, the answers became core. First, control. As a buyer, I was always dependent on suppliers, production delays, quality variations, capacity limits. I had to react to their decisions, but if I owned part of the company, I could be part of those decisions. Second, cost efficiency. Working directly inside the production process would reduce layers, fewer intermediaries, better planning, better margins. Third, growth. I could help the company expand, bring in new clients, introduce better systems, connect them to global markets. And finally, long-term strategy. Instead of short-term transactions, this would become a long-term partnership. Now pause and think about this. This is the key idea behind foreign direct investment. You are not just trading across borders. You are building something inside another country. You are placing capital, time, and trust into a foreign operation, and that changes everything. That is when I realized this was not just an opportunity, it was a strategic decision, and I decided to move forward. Once the decision was made, the next question was simple. How would this actually help my company? Because every investment needs to create value, not just feel exciting. At first, the impacts showed up in operations. Before the acquisition, we were coordinating from a distance. Emails, late-night calls, time zone delays, misunderstandings. Now, we were inside the process. We could plan production more efficiently. We could adjust schedules quickly. We could solve problems in real time. That alone made a difference. Then came consistency. Quality became more stable. Not perfect, but more predictable. And in business, predictability is extremely valuable. Next, cost control improved. We reduced unnecessary steps. Better coordination meant less waste. Better timing meant lower inventory costs. Margins improved, not dramatically overnight, but steadily. And then something more important happened. Growth. Because now, we were not just a buyer. We were part of the supply side. We could take on larger orders, enter new markets, offer more reliable delivery to our clients. And that changed how customers saw us. We were no longer just a trading company. We were becoming an integrated global business. Now step back and think about this. This is one of the core ideas of foreign direct investment. You invest abroad, not just to participate, but to strengthen your entire operation, to connect markets, to improve efficiency, to grow in ways that simple trade cannot achieve. And that is exactly what began to happen for us. But the story does not end with my company, because foreign direct investment is never just about the investor. It also affects the country receiving the investment, and I began to see that very clearly. After the acquisition, we started making changes. Not drastic changes, but steady improvements. We invested in better equipment, upgraded parts of the production line, improved quality control processes. These changes did something important. They increased productivity. The same workers, with better tools, could produce more and with higher consistency. Then came employment. As production expanded, we needed more workers, not overnight, but gradually. More jobs were created. More families became connected to the business, and that matters. We also brought in new practices, better planning systems, more structured workflows, training for supervisors. These were small things, but they added up. Skills improved, efficiency improved. Now, think about this. When a foreign company invests directly in another country, it is not just bringing money. It is bringing knowledge, processes, connections to global markets. And over time, these things can strengthen the local economy. Of course, it is not always perfect. There are challenges. There are concerns. But when done carefully, foreign direct investment can create value on both sides, for the investor and for the local community. And seeing that balance became very important to me. As the business started to stabilize, I began to see something more. The opportunities were bigger than I had first imagined. At the beginning, I was focused on efficiency, costs, coordination, but over time, the investment opened new doors. First, market expansion, because now we had a presence inside India. We were no longer limited to exporting from it. We could also sell within the region, access new customers, build relationships in nearby markets. Second, product development. Being closer to production gave us more flexibility. We could experiment, adjust designs, respond faster to customer feedback. That is much harder to do when everything is happening far away. Third, supply chain strength. We became more resilient, less dependent on external suppliers, better able to manage disruptions. And in global business, that matters a lot. Then there was something less obvious, but very powerful. We learned how business is done in a different environment. Different regulations, different cultural expectations, different ways of solving problems. That knowledge is an asset. Now step back and think. Foreign direct investment is not just about moving capital. It is about positioning your company inside another economy. And when you do that, you gain access to opportunities that you simply cannot reach from a distance. That is when I realized this investment was not just improving our business, it was transforming it. But let me be very clear. This was not a smooth process. Foreign direct investment sounds powerful, and it is. But it also comes with complications. Real ones. The first challenge was regulation. Every country has its own rules, legal structures, approval processes, documentation. Things that seem simple in one country can become complex in another. We had to work through local laws, ownership limits, compliance requirements. It took time, and it required local expertise. Then came communication, not just language, but expectations. The way decisions are made, the pace of work, the way people handle problems. What seems direct in one culture can feel too aggressive in another. What feels efficient to one side may feel rushed to the other. We had to learn how to align. That takes patience. Then there was management structure. Before, the company was run locally. Now, we had cross-border involvement. Different perspectives, different priorities. Balancing those was not always easy. And then there is something subtle. Trust. When ownership changes, people feel uncertain. Employees wonder what will happen. Managers question decisions. You cannot solve that with contracts. You solve it with consistency, with time, with actions. Now think about this. Foreign direct investment is not just financial. It is organizational. It is cultural. It is human. And those dimensions are often the hardest to manage, but they are also the most important. Now let's talk about something very important: risk. Because every foreign direct investment comes with real risk, and ignoring that would be a mistake. The first risk is economic risk. Conditions can change. Demand can slow down. Costs can rise. What looked profitable at the beginning may become less attractive over time. Then there is currency risk. Your revenues may be in one currency, but your costs or financial reporting may be in another. Exchange rates move, and those movements can affect your profits, sometimes significantly. Then comes political and regulatory risk. Governments can change policies. New rules can be introduced. Taxes can shift. Restrictions can appear. Things outside your control can directly affect your investment. There is also operational risk. Managing a business across countries is more complex. Supply chains can break. Coordination can fail. Local issues can escalate quickly. And then there is exit risk. It is not always easy to leave. Selling your stake, transferring ownership, repatriating funds. These processes can be complicated. Now pause and think. When you invest abroad, you are stepping into a different environment, different systems, different uncertainties. So foreign direct investment is not just about opportunity. It is about managing risk in a broader, more complex setting. And that requires discipline, awareness, and long-term thinking. Let's step back for a moment and look at the bigger picture. What did this experience really teach me? Foreign direct investment is not just about buying a company in another country. It is something much deeper. It is about being present inside another economy, not as an outsider, but as a participant. When you trade, you remain at a distance. You buy, you sell, you move goods across borders. But when you invest directly, you cross that boundary. You become part of the local system. You share in its opportunities and its challenges. You connect your company to another country's workforce, its regulations, its culture, its economic environment. And that changes how you think, because now your decisions are no longer isolated. They have effects in more than one place. Now think about the structure. You bring capital, you bring knowledge, you bring access to global markets. In return, you gain local presence. and long-term growth potential. That exchange is the core of foreign direct investment. It is not a short-term transaction. It is a long-term commitment, and that is what makes it powerful, but also what makes it complex. When I look back on that decision, it no longer feels like a simple business move. It feels like a turning point. At the beginning, it was about improving operations, reducing costs, gaining more control. But over time, it became something more. It became a way to connect two parts of the world, our company in New York and a growing operation in India. Different environments, different ways of working, but now part of the same system. There were opportunities, there were challenges, there were risks, and there were moments of uncertainty. But that is what foreign direct investment is. It is not perfect, it is not simple, but it allows companies to grow in ways that are not possible through trade alone. It allows you to build, not just buy, to participate, not just observe, and to think globally while operating locally. So the next time you hear the term foreign direct investment, do not think of it as just a definition. Think of it as a decision, a long-term commitment to step into another economy and become part of it. Thank you for being here. I will see you in the next lecture.